All right, there we go. So here we are. Well, thank you all for coming. Thank you, Matt, for being here with us. I'm Chiara Braidotti from MoCDA, curator at MoCDA, and this is Sia Pineschi. And we are here to expand the theme of the exhibition, Not Only RGB. And Matt is one of the artists featured in this group show. But I'd love to deep dive into the conversation with you already, but let's just mention the fact that the show is on. It opened last month in Decentraland. It was organized with the support of the Decentraland DAO and the Decentraland University. And it's going to be on until the end of January next year. And we're very thrilled to be able to have a chat with Matt Kane, whose work is, we can already glimpse at it at the end of the entrance. So, welcome, Matt. It's nice to have you.
I'm happy to be here with you, Chiara and Sia. Thanks for having me.
And well, for those who might not know him, Matt Kane is a Chicago-born artist whose oil painting very early granted him gallery representation and a great entrance into the collectors-driven market back in the early 2000s. And he was still in his 20s, but he decided to leave galleries and exhibitions for the moment to become a web developer. At the point, as a self-taught programmer, he designed and actually still keeps designing the custom software with which he produces the works he's known for now. And regarding the crypto art realms, he's regarded as one of the OGs, the first ones involved in shaping the space and joining it. And I would like to mention the fact that his commitment was crucial for the establishment of the shared standard of 10% artist royalties across all the main crypto art galleries. So thank you, Matt, for that.
To just quickly jump in to maybe contextualize your art a little bit more within the Not Only RGB exhibition. Yeah. Matt's works on display are taken from his Gazers series, and they celebrate the long history of human fascination with the moon. So this series functions in a similar way to a lunar calendar, with each work shifting and changing throughout its cyclical lifetime, often in relation to specific and often hidden traits captured within the code. So each work contains several layers that interact with each other to produce its final behaviors and colors. The series can almost, in a sense, be regarded as a conceptual self-portrait as well, as each work begins from an autobiographical origin moon, the date for which is derived from a significant event in Matt's life. So there are 12 gazers on exhibition in the space today. And it's important to note that these are in fact still images of the original artworks because they continue to change and shift in real time. So if you want to go see the artworks moving, you can kind of see them you can visit a dedicated page on the artist's website, which also contains a time-lapsed version of their evolution from the time that they were released up until the exhibition opening now. So is there anything else you want to add to that brief introduction, Matt, for your work?
No, that's a fantastic introduction. I really appreciate that.
Fantastic.
Cool. Great. Well then, first of all, the focus of your gazers is the moon, as we said, and with its natural cycles and its evocative power. The series basically constantly portrays the passing of time and as it's reflected by this celestial body. And it gives the same relevance to daily ephemerality as well as major events. And I think we can actually touch upon one of such events. In fact, we've recently witnessed how the work reflected the eclipse that took place last week on November the 8th. And it was absolutely stunning, and all through the power of your code. So we just wondered if you could use this event as a sort of a window into the deeper code of your work. Could you please tell us more about how it functions, how it reacted basically to the actual lunar event?
Sure. So it's kind of been a busy week for gazers because where are we, the 17th or 16th? 2 days ago, gazers had a very special celebration of Claude Monet's birthday. And that was encoded in the artwork to celebrate every November 14th because in many ways I saw gazers as sort of like a continuation of some themes I was sort of studying, after Claude Monet in terms of, change that happens over time on a single subject. And so I wish to, reference and honor Claude Monet in that. And so those moons, all the gazers celebrated that by basically the lines are usually very straight and rigid. But I discovered in creating gazers that if I just sort of like had them go off tilt of their axis when I draw the lines, it ends up looking very impressionistic, like brush strokes. And the gazers community was very fast to notice that the older origin moons were much more brushier, and the newer origin moons were much more subtle. And so it'll be really interesting to see what that time is relative to. Of course, I know, but I don't want to say. But of course, like for the community, it'll be interesting a year from now for them to sort of like look back and compare, like, is this staying the same? Is it relative to the creation of gazers, or is it relative to right now in this moment? But yes, you asked about the eclipse, and for me, and of course, like, as typical, whenever I'm asked a question, I grapevine my way to something else, and then I return. So, so the way that I deal with dates in this is I set origin moons. When I was creating gazers, I was looking back at some recent events in my life, such as having shown at Sotheby's as part of Natively Digital, their first curated NFT exhibition, and also the sale of Right Place and Right Time, which was the first NFT crypto art to sell for over $100,000 back in September of 2020. Both of those dates happened on a new moon, which was very interesting to me. And so it sort of like informed to me, like these two most recent like large events in my life happening on new moons. It sort of informed me that I should look at, the rest of my biography. What are the other critical sort of events in my artistic career? And I ended up finding 12, going all the way up to the Gazer sale, because I sort of like, I understood what Gazers is, and I wanted to, preeminently honor Gazers as a significant event in my life, because I understood that it would be. And I think that it holds up. So I'm glad that that's the 12th origin moon in the project. But essentially, in order to calculate these sorts of, lunar cycles, it's very predictable. The moon's cycle is roughly 29.53 days. And so all you need to do is you need to locate the exact date and time of a previous known new moon, and then we move forward from there. And what's interesting is, of course, like over time, it gets a little jarred, by minutes or hours, but you end up with these little families of origin moons, and they're all sort of like changing together. They're all sort of like transforming together. And so that, and in terms of the eclipse, very recently I was urging, I had kind of a fake out for the recent partial solar eclipse about a month ago. I told everyone it was going to happen, and then it didn't. And I reminded everyone, don't trust, verify, and I suggested everyone go look in the code. And I showed them where the recent lunar eclipse, how that's done, that there's a Unix timestamp. And of course, like, there's more for the gazer community to understand about what this work is by going through the code. It's interesting because in crypto, we have audits on code, and it's very important that there's audits on code, to understand if there's backdoors, to a certain blockchain or whatnot. And so in creating gazers, I thought it would be interesting to make to add things and make things in such a way that a code audit, and if a community around gazers ever does like really venture into the code. And recently they, I think BAPAC has been going into the code and meddling with it, which I love. Like, I see it as evidence of a really passionate community and passionate collectors who are trying to understand the work better. It's
What? I fear you freeze for a second.
Similar in the way I lost you.
No, now we can hear you.
Okay.
Yeah, you were saying you were talking about the community, and I know how deeply you care for collectors and for being able to give them specific extra content and all the information, all the insights that you can on your work, which is great.
Right on. Sorry, no, not at all. Was I disconnected for a long time or just a short time?
No, for a few seconds. Okay. Just a few seconds.
I've lost myself now.
Oh, that's okay.
Okay, maybe you can pick up and kind of go a little bit deeper into one of the aspects that is so compelling about gazers. So you have this autobiographical element, which is very clear and very sublimated, I think, into the code. You have this community aspect, which is very important to deriving a sense of, collective experience and that. But I think one thing that might be interesting to delve into a little bit deeper is the relevance of celestial bodies, like the moon itself as a starting point for your artistic research, because I believe back in your start in the crypto art space, your Genesis work on Super Rare was inspired by some of the first images of a black hole ever portrayed in 2019, the M87. So it'd be really interesting to know why astronomy and these celestial bodies has kind of picked up such a significance behind you and your career as a through line almost.
Yeah, ever since I was a child, I was really fascinated with astronomy. My family would go on these long vacations throughout the United States and visit all of the science museums and planetariums. And I was a really sort of like deep thinking, brooding child. And so like in kind of like confronting ideas of like the black hole and stuff, I would just like lay in bed and close my eyes really tight and imagine what was here before I was here and what was here before the Earth was here, and try to like, and there was, and it's of course, like these sorts of, when you're doing this as like a 2 and 3 year old child, it tends to like track throughout your life where you tend to ask yourself these questions. And I suppose in searching for like why things happen in someone's life and sort of like the collisions of paths and stuff, it's like it's almost like I have to look up towards the heavens in order to like come up with some sort of like reasoning or understanding of like why particular paths collide, why some paths like completely cut off, and where all of those are sort of merging. And I think in the realm of astronomy and our yearning to understand the universe and the particulars of what happens and why, it's a natural like pull for me.
Yeah, I suppose it's almost particularly interesting to think about the fact that like celestial bodies are so constant, not just throughout our own lives, but the lifetime of humanity. But even within those consistencies, it still changes. It moves in position in the solar system. It changes phases throughout the moon and the lunar lifetime. The sun continues to explode and change its color, and the moon doesn't necessarily give off solar flares, but like it does also change quite dramatically. So you can pick up a lot of the poignancy and like consistency and ephemerality, or which word am I trying to say?
Ephemeral.
Yeah, exactly.
Ephemerality, yeah.
Ephemerality even, yeah, perfect. So yeah, that was absolutely something that was particularly interesting, I think, for us when we were putting this exhibition together, because nature as a concept is quite constant, but in its practice is quite changing. So yeah, that was absolutely something we felt like
absolutely
interesting.
And also,
go ahead.
Oh yeah, no, go ahead.
I was just going to say, capturing the ephemeral in this was very important to me, and in having these sorts of moons, changing and having some sort of like, there's some pattern, there's some higher design that each moon has that informs its color theory. I hoped that collectors would start to attach, their own moments in their life to a particular design, and that they might, track these, find a way to archive these over time. And of course, it's code, so it can always be hacked to be revisited. But what's interesting is that the community has been sort of like very anti, like any sort of anyone trying to mess with the code, because they realize like the real magic of this is in the passing moment. Anyway, so what were
absolutely you... No, in fact, I was going to say something else, but we thought about the specific trait of color theory, named color theory, in your gazers. And since you also mentioned that, I would jump right in and ask you, so what way does this particular trait inform the behavior and look of gazers? Because I saw there is a very detailed specific information in it. And I don't know if you want to give us an example and tell us how it works.
Oh boy.
Such a good...
I can do my best, and I'm pulling up one on my screen so that I can actually reference the traits by their proper names, and not thing I'm making up in my head right now.
No, but I mean, in general, color, I mean, the chromatic component is vital to so many of your works, that we, looking at all the traits and finding this one with this very one on color theory, we were intrigued by how it worked.
Yeah. So I'm looking at Gazer 708 right now, and that's one that I collected. I bought for my own collection, and it has the color theory style Millets, which is that's referencing the director of Voyage to the Moon. And so the color theory style, you can think of the color theory styles as essentially like recipes of probability. And so if a particular gazer has a color theory style, it's basically saying, okay, like your probability of having, and I'm just making this up right now, this isn't necessarily to this example, but it's saying your probability of having a color harmony that uses lots of complementary colors is going to be very high, whereas your probability of having a color triad is very low, perhaps.
Okay.
It goes through a lot of these, and I'm simplifying it so that we understand, but it's essentially a recipe of probabilities. And I was finding that these sort of recipes of probabilities were yielding different sorts of results. So that became a trait that I named. Each of these also have a color theory seed color, and that's essentially a color we start at. And these are all pigments. So these are all like paint colors. So they're all paints from when I would use physical materials. They're all paints from my palette. And essentially it starts out at that color, and then how the algorithm works is I was trying to replicate my own conversations with color that I've had for the last 20 years, in terms of like, in my mind's eye, I'll see a color, and so I start there, and then I will think to myself, yes, but yes, purple, I don't know. What if we did put down orange there, and I might put down a little orange there, and that changes sort of the colors that I'll see around.
Give him a second. He came back last time.
In my mind's eye.
Okay, I fear you froze for a few seconds again, but yeah, we're with you. So you're telling us about your way to perceive and almost project colors in your life. Oh, but I fear we lost you again, Matt.
This might be the one. He has said that if he continues to experience technical difficulties, he'll rejoin on a different device. Although it appears he's back now. We see him.
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah, I'm back.
Okay. Yeah.
Cool. Okay.
This is just the joy of having digital conversations. So I think everyone has been here at one point or another. So
totally.
Yeah. Scattered across the world.
Yeah, so essentially it's about having a starting point to have a conversation about color within the algorithm. And the algorithm, it's using these probabilities of color harmonies, but it's also being adversarial sometimes towards those. So it's a complex algorithm, but I think that it worked out very nicely for gazers.
So I would say so, for sure.
I think also one thing that you mentioned early on when you were speaking about this is when you named your color trait Malay, I believe to the Journey to the Moon. Is there a direct relationship there between the color palette of the film, which, if I remember correctly, and correct me if I'm wrong, is black and white, but then they colorized it to very intense, you could hand color it with reds and blues and all that. If this is something that, is coming up with, errantly, let me know. But I mean, it's interesting to see the relationship between the personal relationship to color that you've had in your life, mentioning the story, the replacing the orange and the purple and all of those, to also these extracted relationships to color in nature and having it be, something that you can either take on and alter or just take on and present authentically. Like I'm wondering if there's
That's a great question. I think that there was a relationship in that particular color theory, and I think these do tend to have more intense and iridescent colors to them. And I think that was probably on my mind unconsciously when I was naming these.
Yeah, I think the unconscious is quite a powerful tool, to be fair.
It is.
Especially when you're working autobiographically, you almost have to trust the process of unconsciousness, because otherwise it becomes too contrived. So, yeah. I have another question for you, which is, so if we look in the center of this exhibition, Not Only RGB, we have an expanded version of one of your games, which you've generously worked with us to kind of put together. This is important to note that some of the layers have been collapsed in this, so it's not a one-to-one relationship between the gazer that it is presenting, but it should demonstrate how the layers are interacting within both the color theory and the shapes and the or the lines and the organization of it. So I was wondering if you could kind of expand a little bit on this fascination for layers, and maybe how it dates back to your very early work in production with resin, or kind of the origins of that.
Sure. So this really goes back to the first Origin Moon, which is from 2001, which is called The Dream. Essentially, I was 20 years old, and I had a dream that I was walking around an art exhibition, and I was seeing all this like gorgeous art, and I had like a real connection to it, like in my heart, like it was like touching me, and I had this like deep connection, but I didn't recognize any of it. It was all unfamiliar to me, and yet I had this like powerful connection to it. And wandering through this exhibition, I find this one room that's completely black. It's super dark, but in it I see that these figures of these children, and as I walk towards the children, I realize like they break up into all of these successive layers, and I'm able to walk through them, and I'm able to and it's not just that they're made up of layers. It's just like the layers are made up of like these like pulsing little geometries and these things. And so when I step back away from the artwork in my dream, then I see the figures again. And so it's like this really trippy thing I'd never experienced in life before. And when I woke up, I was sort of convinced that I had just seen and I had just visited sort of like my future retrospective, which was crazy. I was like 20. There was like no reason to believe I would ever have a retrospective, that I would ever be important enough for something like that. But I sort of like really, because of like my heartfelt like connection to the art I was seeing, I did feel that was work that I had yet to create in a life I had yet to live. I'm 42 now, so this is like half my life ago. I've lived another life since that life that was lived to that point. And so it's interesting now, because I've realized so I started to make works in resin that were layered, because of course I thought, I need to make a product. And so I need to make something that's tangible to sell, and I'm a painter, and so I'm going to do this. But before I did that, when I first woke up from the dream, I created a 3D model in Bryce to basically like capture like the experience of what I had seen in a subject matter I had just recently started with. And so it's interesting, because my first instinct was digital, but then I started making these 3D resin boxes, which were like super heavy and you couldn't walk through them. They had the same sort of like perspective shifting thing going on. And my gallerist, Ann Nathan, she always referred to them as my prototypes. And it was always a little frustrating to me because I was really, I was wearing a respirator and a whole chemical suit, and every day it was like stirring the resin in this like big suit with, ventilators and this vacuum chamber I had invented, which would like suck all the oxygen out and bring the bubbles up to the surface. And then I would introduce carbon dioxide through another valve, and then that would like break all the bubbles. It was a very like involved process. And she's like telling me, these are your prototypes, Matt. Like you're going to hit it with this one day.
No.
But
this is the beginning. Yeah.
This is the beginning.
Yeah.
But it was like now so the last few years experimenting, putting these sorts of layers in the metaverse, in these virtual realities, I realized, okay, number one, if that was a vision of my future retrospective, then I was experiencing it through some sort of like vision goggles or some other altered state technology that we don't have yet. Number two, if it wasn't a vision of my future, it was certainly a self-fulfilling prophecy that I've believed in it, and I've basically tracked the last 20 years of my life to sort of like fulfill this path that I felt I belonged on because of it.
Do you feel like the digital format is the most appropriate then for the layered dream, or is it more of the newest form of its iteration?
I think it's the newest form of it right now. It's I have to believe, just for the path that I've followed, that probably it's going to be digital, because you have to be able, like, just to like follow the logic of my dream, I was able to walk through these things. It's possible, though, in the physical world, we have holographic technologies in the future. And this is one of the exciting things about one of the reasons I decided to work with code like 10 years ago exclusively is code is basically all mathematics, and it leaves us a fixed medium that can be worked with. It can be reinterpreted. So it's like when a painter, moves his hand across, a canvas, it's like that's like super fixed to the canvas, and we can never like really like revisit that. We can imitate it, but we can't like. So I wanted to create basically a medium that was more like music, that was more like a player piano, for instance. You give that sheet music, it'll play the composition. So I wanted my paintings to be like musical compositions that could be like replayed. And then like, what happens if you pour a gallon of motor oil into the player piano, and what does that sound like? And and that's sort of like the M87 black hole series. I was introducing, data that I had captured, sort of.
Oh,
give him a second.
Yeah.
Like symbol. Think I'm back?
Yep, you're back.
Yep.
Okay.
You're back. Yes.
So you were saying about the having a constant and altering it as well.
Yeah, you were referring back to the black hole images that were your Genesis pieces, and how you fed some data into them.
Yeah. So I was really, and that's the exciting thing about anyway digital art, in terms of like the way I'm working with it from like a generative art code perspective, is that like everything I'm creating, it's leaving a footprint of math and code, and these are things that can be picked up by future generations, and reinterpreted using future technologies that haven't been invented yet. And so when I'm kind of creating these kind of mock-ups in virtual worlds, it's not to say this is the right presentation of this, but I'm trying to like give hints to like the future, because like I only have right now to communicate, and sort of give sort of like metaphorical hints. It's kind of like when I'm painting and I'm like, oh, I want like a little like orange pattern circled by yellow there, you know, and then you just end up with like, you know, orange and a yellow circle around it. But that can be transformed into something much more elaborate. So I always see things as perhaps metaphors that can be iterated upon and made more verbose. You know, these sorts of forms. And I see this the same way. Is I'm trying to give a hint. It's just like me putting a little dot on a paper and circling it. It's like I want the future to understand, like, this is not fixed. This is just me saying, yes, there's this pattern exists. This is how, you know, this is how I'm picturing. This is my best way that I can show it right now. But you guys take my code and you guys apply it to this, like, you know, these holographics, you know, centuries that you walk through and everything. Great, you know. That's sort of my intention, and that's how I feel about all of my work. Is I want my work to be, you know, muddled with by future generations if they're so choose to be interested, that they, you know, who knows.
I think that's quite evident as well, because even within an individual work, you have an incredible amount of layers, each one of which interacts with the layers in a different way. So each layer consists of an aspect of the artwork, and then in conversation that changes to a slightly different degree, have another layer, it changes to a slightly different degree. The I suppose digital presentation of that is one thing, and then you also introduce this time scale as well, which changes the artwork based off of the lunar events or calendar events or something that's deep within the code. So it's it's hard to pin down each of the individual artworks and say this is what it is in its current iteration, because it will continue to change and continue to morph. So yeah,
absolutely. And when you reference the future, of course, I mean, this is a living work which is bound to keep evolving in the future and live beyond like current technologies, but even probably current imagination capabilities. So like we might see it morph into something we can't even picture right now. In fact, I was wondering what you think this work will represent, or what questions will it pose or might it pose in the future, in your opinion, if you thought about that?
Yeah. One of the mechanisms in this artwork is that it speeds up 1 frame per second, like every X number of new moons. Most of them, I think, it speeds up 1 frame per second every 12 new moons. And so you can think of that as speeding up 1 frame per second every year. Some of them are slower. Some of them move up 1 frame per second every 10 years. So over time, the scale of that, and of course, like all of this is relative to the origin moon, the speed at which these go. So some of the questions that I think are going to be brought up by this is, like, in terms of right now in 2022, 2021, when I conceived this work, what was my optimism for technology building upon itself into the future? And does this artwork at some point like outpace society's ability to keep up with my anticipated, or is it too slow? Is the march towards progress too slow, and we do end up going much faster, and Gazers has no problem like keeping up? Because right now, you know, there's some Gazers that could move much swifter, but it's being shown on a computer whose like CPU can't keep up with, you know, its potential. And I think in terms of like an autobiographical self-portrait, it's like that's super important to me, like that aspect, like that there are some moons that at a certain point in time they have potential that they're not reaching. I felt that most of my life, that I had potential I wasn't reaching. And so when I see these Gazers, you know, that could be moving at, you know, 20 frames per second, but they're so complex, they have maybe the most layers, and so they're grinding away on someone's, like, you know, medium, you know, quality computer. It makes me smile because I see myself in that. You know, I see myself at different points in my life, you know, in all of these. So I think like the performance of these into the future, you know, and of course, like, you know, you add 1 frame per second every year, you know, years go by, you know, and we watch things in terms of like being 60 frames per second. That'll be somewhere around my 100th birthday, right? That the oldest, like the youngest origin moon gets. So basically upon my 100th birthday, you know, we'll be seeing these things moving swiftly, you know, at the pace that our eyes keep up with them. But then what happens, you know, in 200, 300 years, 500 years, if humans last that long?
Right.
And what sort of effects, like if their technology can keep up with that frame per second, you know, what effects does that cause for these really fast moving gazers? And what does that do to a society that is then valuing maybe these really slowly advancing gazers? Right now, the slowly advancing ones, they're not prized as much. The size 0 moons, they're not prized as much. You know, but people are looking at these on their cell phones and on their little like 13-inch screens. Gazers would, I imagine gazers taking up entire 9-foot walls. Like that's how gazers need to be seen in the future, is at 8K or 16K. Like we don't have 16K yet, but gazers can scale to that. Gazers will scale to the anticipated technologies. And you're going to see that these like the size 0 moons, you know, they're going to be the size of our heads on a wall, and they're going to be just as beautiful as the large moons on a cell phone. And that's you know, and that's I think one of the questions too that I think Gazers is going to bring up is, was Matt Kane an artist or was Matt Kane a comedian?
What kind of joke are you intending to tell then? This is the I think that's quite interesting, thinking about the gazers continually running faster and faster and faster. And it brings up this question for me, which is, at what point, presumably the gazers throughout the entirety of its lifetime, when it's going quite slowly and to when it's going incredibly fast, is one artwork. But at what point do you feel that these gazers are naturally progressing towards an end, or is there an eternal progression for it to go faster and faster? Or what kind of lifetime do you envision for these works for themselves?
Yeah, they're headed towards a destiny of going faster and faster and faster, which maybe humans are mirroring that on their current pace. Maybe humans will learn to slow down. Maybe I think one of the biggest compliments I've received from my community of collectors is some have told me that gazers have helped them slow down, and it's helped them pay attention to time going by and the speeds at which time goes by. And I've had that myself.
Are they quite?
It's a larger clock. You know, these are clocks that are set to time scales that we do not usually look at. We look at time scales that are set to hours and minutes and seconds.
Yeah, that's really fascinating, and it's a life clock, one of the comments from our audience, and I guess it is. And with all the evocative power that the moon itself summons, it's great.
You know, gazers are.
Oh, sorry, Matt.
Oh.
I feel we lost you for a second, but you're back now.
I'm back. I grabbed my phone in case I needed to jump on that.
Okay, great. No, we were talking about the evocative power of the moon itself, and how basically in human history, human life, we started understanding time through the solar and lunar cycles and the season. And so it's great how in the digital realms, this translation of such a fundamental, natural, celestial body is actually giving a different pace to a collector's or a viewer's or someone else's life, like with everyday dimension.
I think that's quite an interesting point as well, as like the original clocks are solar and lunar and very natural. And now if we imagine what time is, I think instinctively all of us imagine a clock, right? All of us imagine numerical digits or a digital interface or something of that nature, which almost divorces it from each of our individual lived experiences. It feels like it's something quite separate to us now that we all, you know, live through, but not necessarily is directly related, aside from, you know, when it's nighttime it gets dark. But even then, with daylight saving times, the time at which time shifts throughout the day is pretty, feels arbitrary in some ways. So yeah, it's quite interesting to relate it back to a natural cycle that doesn't necessarily care what the number on the clock is, but will continue to go throughout the entire, at its own pace, at its own time, regardless of if that's faster or faster. So I think another thing that we were quite interested to know about the series is, so one aspect that we touched on lightly throughout the conversation was this concept of the code driving changes within the artworks. And I think we touched quite lightly on deliberate changes and accidental changes and how they kind of contribute to one final artwork, which is a deliberate piece regardless of each of the individual changes within it. So it'd be quite interesting to know your kind of process for selecting what deliberate aspects get put in, and then what accidental aspects get kept in once you discover them.
Sure. So I think one of the most deliberate things, and the Gazers community is right now sort of like putting this together, so I feel like I can speak on it, is that the longer, like, my intention is for Gazers to be sort of like on their own digital device, constantly running in a collector's, you know, house. Obviously, like, we don't have that paradigm yet. Like, we're just seeing the industry this past year start to get its gears rolling in terms of like having digital displays. But we're nowhere near, you know, where it's going to be. But my intention, of course, like was to create something with that in mind, that a collector might cherish their Gazer so much that they'll have it on a dedicated display. And so one of the aspects of this artwork is that the longer you have it running, the more you're going to understand it's changing. Because these lines are rotating at different paces, and they're given instructions to rotate at a particular degree, at a particular pace, for only so long, and then they're given new instructions on how to change their pace. And all of these lines are given independent instructions. Each layer has its own independent instructions in terms of like how the line widths are pulsing. Their directions are changing. Sometimes they're not moving. Sometimes they are moving, and they're all interacting with one another when we look at it and perceive the color. And so the colors and patterns are changing. And right now, like, I think yesterday, in fact, there were collectors in our Discord who were noticing this, and they were like, look, this, this orange, like, is all the way over here now. Which was really cool. And there and another collector, Felix, he has pointed out that right after the lunar eclipse, his Gazer looked completely different. and he suggested maybe a wormhole opened up. And indeed,
Wow.
like when I created Gazers a year ago, I went through and like was very deliberate in bug checking it. And this is one of the bugs I discovered was there is certain events, both man-made and natural, but that are huge sort of like celebrations. Following these events, a gazer might diverge into a new path. And I thought that was really beautiful. And I've talked about how in my own life, I'm always sort of like asking myself, oh, what if I did this differently? Like, would this have happened differently? Would this path, you know, I'm very concerned and interested and almost obsessed, maybe especially like the last 10 years, obsessed about like different choices I made or different choices I didn't make in terms of like affecting others. And so that in terms of a autobiographical piece, I thought this is that, you know, I'm making the decision to leave this in because this adds more meaning to the artwork. The potential that following an event like an eclipse, like New Year's Eve, they noticed this already. New Year's Eve, we're all like envisioning the future. We're all reflecting on the path. And what better time, you know, for a gazer moon to diverge into a new path? And how long will that open for? And does it go back at the next new moon? Or does it stay open? Or when does it converge upon itself, if it ever converges upon itself? And so I thought those sorts of questions that it opens up, and not for everyone, only for those who are dedicated enough to really watch the artwork. Like only they will experience it, and I think they will experience it differently. And so it felt like, you know, as a painter, like my approach to code, I wasn't a coder first. Like I was an artist. I was a painter first. So I've always seen that as like, you know, when in the process of painting, it's just like when sometimes you have like these paint drips that happen on your canvas. And then to me, it's really beautiful because it's like, it's evidence of the human there. And sometimes it's like the most marvelous part of a painting is like the evidence of the human. And so I thought I need to like treat this bug because it's more meaningful. It's not a bug. Like it's my choice now, deliberate, to leave this in there as the paint drips upon the canvas. And you know, and it's been beautiful because, you know, I think collectors are approaching it from you know, the right perspective, you know, and they're interested in, you know, quantum physics and these new theories that are coming out, and they're talking about that amongst themselves. And this, like, what I have to say about the Gazers community is it organically grew. Like, I created the artwork, and I did not have any plans of creating a Discord. Like, they came to me like 2-3 weeks after the artwork came out, and they were like, we need our own Discord. Like, we need a room for this, we need a room for that, we need a, you know, and I was like, great, you know, great. Like, I did not intend like for this community that's super solid, like to come together, but it did. And it's been the greatest gift to me, because it's such a place of positivity for me to like go to, because Twitter can be such a black hole that just like sucks you in. And like Gazers is this like really peaceful, positive realm of folks just like trying to learn and teach each other. And you know, shout out to the Gazers community, because you know, I can't say enough for them. Like, and just my own mental health having improved, like because you know, they're caring so much. Like I thought eventually there's going to be people who care about this artwork. Like, clearly, like at the mint, it went for like 0.25 ETH, and so it felt, you know, maybe people aren't going to get it at first.
I think we
but
lost.
like they've,
okay.
Yeah, sorry about that.
Okay, no, you're back. We're here. But as the comments show, I mean, collectors and the community is very grateful to you, and we are as well. I mean, it's great to see such work basically living on a parallel dimension and enriching this time that we experience in daily life, as well as what we can envision or cannot yet envision for the future. It's really great.
I think we might be coming up on time very shortly, but I wanted to ask Matt if there was anything else that you wanted to practice before we end.
Oh gosh, that's a good question.
I mean, there's no obligation to, but just as a final parting word.
You know, I want to just riff a little bit on. I've been seeing a lot on Twitter, just like how much people like care about artists, and like a few years ago, I did not see people caring about artists as much, right? And they cared about artists in a different way, maybe, and they didn't care about the well-being of the artists. And like recently, like just in the last day or two, like I see a lot of people who are like wanting to stand up for artists, and it's just like, to me, it's super beautiful. And it like in my, like I'm forever changed, you know, by this whole crypto art community. They've changed my relationship to my past. You know, and I think like Gazers is a celebration of my history, and it's a celebration of my, you know, the transformation that I've made as a person. And I'm rambling right now, but what I mean to say is that I really have a deep appreciation for everyone in this community, and that so many people, it really feels like a new paradigm in art. It really feels like the promise of crypto art is still alive, and it's always going to be changing. I think Sparrow Reed said it best when she said crypto art is the community, and the crypto art is defined by the community. But it shall never be co-opted, because there's too many real people out there.
But I think that's completely fair. The amount of vibrancy that's present both in the wider digital art community and even within the Gazers community as well is kind of just another evidence of how deeply these digital artworks have really touched people and made them think differently about their own lives and made them feel like they're part of something bigger. So yeah, it's been, I think we're coming up on time now, but it's been an absolute joy to speak with you, Matt. Thank you so much for joining us and for allowing us to present your artworks and working with us on that expanded version of Gazers. It's been such a joy. So thank you.
Absolutely. We can't thank you enough. Absolutely.
Thank you, Sia and Chiara. I really appreciate the beautiful ways you both spoke about my work. It's very much appreciated, and I think the work of thoughtful curators like yourselves, it's much needed in this realm. And I think the way that you put together this show, and you're putting together these talks, I know I'm the first of many you're going to have. It's wonderful, and I think the more we contextualize the artists and the artworks and the sort of interactions we're all having in the community, it's like, we need to be able to have future generations, when they refer to this chapter in art, they really need to they'll be able to see and understand us in ways that we haven't been able to see and understand other art movements. And so anyway, I appreciate both of you for intersecting on this path with me here. Thank you.
We're very happy to be on this path. So
absolutely, it was our pleasure.
So in quick summary, we have other artist talks coming up, so please check the schedule for those talks with the other artists in the exhibition. And I think with that, unless Chiara, there's anything else?
No, just see you next Wednesday, same time, with the 38 4000, which are Mattia Cuttini and Luca Donno. And once again, Matt, we're beyond grateful. It was, terrific chat. Absolutely. Cool. Thank you so much to everyone who attended as well.